you know how last time you were all like, Boris Karloff is my man. This is how I'm really, my main takeaway from this movie is just how much I'm into Vincent Price.
Yeah.
And, like, he doesn't even have a mustache in this movie.
No, he doesn't.
It's just bleached blonde hair, but it's like, and, you know, I feel like I'm doing better personally than you are. Because, like, Boris Karloff was, like, a necrophiliac and a Satanist. Where I was like, this guy's just kind of into his sister. I feel like it's definitely a step up. It's definitely... It's
slightly.
Just a little bit.
Falling for guys in Hollywood movies is, like, old Hollywood horror movies is... I mean, it's a crapshoot. You're going to find somebody who's totally messed up and who's not worthy of you, but then you're like, well maybe. I don't know.
It's just his voice. I love Vincent Price's voice.
Yeah. He was really good in the movie.
He was very good.
From what I remember, after 4 wines and 2 shots of tequila.
That's the way you have to watch the movie.
But I think I appreciated it enough.
Yeah, I think I definitely
I couldn't stop giggling at one point.
I appreciated it before it started, so...
Yeah.
Anyways.
You've already seen it before.
Yeah,
How
I
many
had.
times? Just one?
Just the one.
Oh, okay.
So,
but you're deeply in love, yes.
Deeply in love with Vincent Price. Yes. Welcome to Shadow and Light, a film podcast with Molly and Sarah. I'm Molly.
I'm Sarah.
And today we are talking about the 1960 film, The House of Usher. Not Fall of the House of Usher, like I read in my research.
Right.
Roger Corman, the director, omitted the fall part, but...
I don't know why. I think it's more dramatic that way.
Yeah, but maybe you didn't want to give away the ending for people that weren't familiar with the story.
I suppose, yeah.
But then again, I don't know, like, how often was Edgar Allan Poe read during that time?
My mom went to school in the 60s, so I think she learned a lot of it. Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with that story. You and I both studied that. It's a very strange story.
Mm-hmm. It's a very strange story. And before we get started, just apologies on the weird upload schedule getting to episode 2. It's kind of difficult to get a solid recording schedule figured out in the middle of summer. But we're working on it. Yeah. And it's definitely something we're going to get better at because we do want to do weekly uploads.
And we're going to stockpile as much as we can in case we have a scheduling delay.
Right.
So. We have so many movies to talk about. I just can't wait. I
know. And well, I think it's just fitting number 2 is The House of Usher because this was kind of my segue movie, at least for me, into getting into more of that classic horror film. Because there had just been a night I wanted to watch something and a friend was over, and out of everything she picked this movie, because she's also a literary grad student, I guess. What are we getting? We're getting a master's. It's been a long day. It's been a long day. Anyways, this is the one she picked, and it's very interesting. The initial thoughts. It's an interesting film. It's not. Yeah. It's not like The Black Cat.
It's not at all.
No, where you have constantly building tension.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just a consequence of the fact that it is so. It's the horror aspects seem really outdated in some ways.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But there's
30 years later, so yeah, of course. Or almost 30 years later.
Oh, after The Black Cat.
Yeah.
But The Black Cat, I think, still kind of it works. The horror it's building up to works, whereas this one just feels very dry.
It does.
We definitely had to have a couple glasses of wine before watching it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The second time, just to kind of enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, this isn't really my decade of horror very much, and I prefer, is it Hammer or Hammer? I never know. But
I think it's Hammer.
It's, Hammer House of Horror. That's the kind of thing I'm familiar with, like Peter Cushing, who I adore. And, a lot of those, but they're campy. Like, I go into them knowing that, the blood is going to look like paint, and the decor is like, basically a high school musical setup. So I don't really care. Yeah. But no, I love this film. I mean, it is very campy, and it's very much, Hellfire Club kind of furniture, very ornate with the, red sort of look to it. But no, I thought they did a great job. I was actually really impressed. And the more I thought about the movie, after the wine was out of my system, I definitely appreciated it. So
yeah, well, like you were saying, the architecture in the movie is gorgeous, and it blows my mind the more I think about it. I realize there's only really 4 characters in the movie. It seems much fuller.
It's very stark.
And granted, they talk about the line of ushers, and there's a dream sequence, and maybe we should start off by talking about the Edgar Allan Poe story.
Yes, let's do that.
And to be honest, I haven't read it in a very long time.
Me neither.
It's been 8
Not since 2011 or 12. It's been a while.
I did a bit of research on this last night just to kind of see what I can find. And there's available online, there's a Penguin introduction that kind of talks about it. First thing, Post sold this story for $10.
Really? I'm trying to think how much value that would be in what? Was it 18 what?
Something. 18 something.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to say late Victorian period, but in America, obviously. So, yeah, that sounds like, it sounds like it would be a reasonable sum for what he produced. But I remember liking the story. I'm not really into American Lit, but it's really cool. I remember our project for American Lit when I was in undergrad, we actually had to draw the house or something, and I drew a house with a giant eye on it with a big crack in the middle. So, but anyway, I'm going to probably cut that one.
No, it's all good. More tangents, the better. I enjoy a nice tangent, a nice traipse through the wild of your mind.
Yes.
Ooh. That was gorgeous. Beautiful.
That was a lovely sentence, yes.
Thank
I think you should be happy with that.
I just like the word traipse.
Traipse.
Yeah. So from what I gathered from the Penguin introduction, it turns out, I think at least having not read the story in a really long time, that the movie is pretty faithful to the source material.
Absolutely, I believe so.
I didn't realize, because all I remember from reading the story is the fact that the house falls down at the end.
Yeah. And
the sister in the walls. But what they kind of talked about, one of the lines that immediately stuck out to me, I should say, is Poe characterizes the temperament to be described in the House of Usher, Fall the House of Usher, as a lute suspended in midair, which, if you've seen the movie, will immediately just bring joy to your heart.
Yes.
Because there's a very extensive lute scene. There's a lot of looting in this movie.
The lute scene.
And not talking about, stealing treasure, about playing an actual lute. And how that's a central image. It's just a central part of the story, and that really made me laugh.
Yeah, that's a perfect quote, actually.
Yeah, and so kind of what the Penguin introduction to this edition, which I don't have the author editor, kind of ends up saying is that the crisis in the story is that there's a split in Roderick Usher's personality, and there's a total disruption of his relationship with the world outside of himself. The result, quote, as in so many of Poe's stories, is remarkably like what Kierkegaard describes as the concept of dread.
Oh, how fancy.
I know. A desire for what one dreads, a sympathetic antipathy. Dread is an alien power which lays hold of an individual, and yet one cannot tear oneself away, nor has a will to do so. For one fears, but what one fears, one also desires. Dread then makes the individual impotent, and the first sin always occurs in impotence. Apparently, therefore, the man lacks accountability, but this lack is what ensnares him.
So he has a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy situation.
Yeah.
Whereas we young people like to say death wish. Or something like that. I mean, just kind of, he's a train wreck. He's a train wreck man, as are a lot of these sort of tragic anti-heroes in horror films.
And that's the central, I think, tension of House of Usher.
Yeah.
Is this all in Vincent Price's head and Roderick Usher's head, this idea of a family curse, that they have to be wiped out, or is it actually real? And a different article ultimately argues that it doesn't really matter. Yeah, actually, it's in this introduction too.
Oh.
Whether his acute sensitivity is a product of madness, or madness the result of extreme cultivation of the senses, matters less than the realization that the two states merge in Poe into a single image of terror. And then it goes on to say that Usher line is the deterioration of the family, of the house. I don't know, you can cut this part, basically. What I didn't, I guess, write this part down, or might have come from something else, but it's the idea of ultimately it doesn't really matter if it is the family curse or if it's just in his head these days.
I got the feeling it was kind of both, and a lot of these horror movies, they always try to blend the two, because it's like they want to leave the audience questioning, oh gosh, is it something that characters just has a sort of idea about, or is it actually physically real? And I always find that tension really exciting, and I think that's partly what causes the horror, obviously. But I got the feeling that he had the power to overcome that curse. I feel like it was a curse in a way. Just but you could argue by genetics, it's like, okay, all these people, all these family members have the same sort of traits to be horrible people, and he could have totally broken that chain and gotten his sister, medical care and for her catalepsy, if it isn't, or psychological care or whatever. In those days he wouldn't, but he
needed it himself.
And he needed it himself, and he could have had an amazing career as a terrible lute player.
Yeah.
And everyone would have come to see
horrifying
him.
painter.
Yeah.
His paintings are horrifying.
Heavens to Betsy.
So,
those are bad.
Okay, so before we kind of walk through the plot, I think, because I kind of want to do a little bit of background information on the movie.
I'm excited. More background.
So, yeah, I know, just because I jumped feet first into talking about Usher. And I need to,
but we're here to be
I'm
nerdy.
too excited. I'm too excited. I need to just take it back and just one breath of Vincent Price at a time.
Yes.
So Turner Classic Movies has a little write-up about it that I actually found online. And it was an interview partly with Roger Corman, but then it also takes quotes from Vincent Price, A Daughter's Biography, which was written by Victoria Price. Like, okay, of course. Vinny was one of those guys.
Vinny.
So one of the things that they were initially kind of concerned about when they were making the film is that the story didn't have a monster. And so Roger Corman always was saying, the house is the monster. Can't you see it? It's the house. And so in the middle of shooting, he made sure that he had this kind of covered and asked Vincent Price to utter a couple of lines that he had written into the script at the last minute, saying the house lives, the house breathes. Because this isn't a straightforward horror film. At least it wouldn't have been at that time, compared to that horror films were synonymous really with monster, like some kind of monster.
Yeah.
And so they really, Corman at least saw the story as the house being the kind of the monster, the vehicle. Seems also that Vincent Price did have some creative decisions though as well, because it talks about how, well, first of all, he got $50,000 of the $270,000 budget for the movie.
Oh. To go to his, what it cost him?
Yeah, that's 20%. No, just him. That was his pay.
Oh, I see.
That was his pay. That's 20-ish%.
I want to know, did he insist on the blonde hairdo?
He did. Price
that makes my entire day.
Yeah, no, here's the quote. Price suggested to Corman that he bleach his hair for the role. As Victoria Price writes, indeed, Vincent had an affinity with Poe's characters. He was attracted to the romantic ethos of these Gothic tales, in which hypersensitive men whose dark heritage combined with their refined sensibilities doomed them to torment as outsiders. He would later say of House of Usher that, I loved the white-haired character I was playing because he's the most sensitive of all Poe's heroes.
Wow, past the nightshade.
Jeez. Also, he calls Roderick Usher a hero. I mean, I guess that's one really dark way of looking at it, but this is Vincent Price we're talking about.
Well, anti-hero, for sure.
That makes sense. Or villain.
Borderline suggested incestuous interest in your sister. I mean, I wouldn't say interest, but there's a little bit too much chemistry for my liking.
It's there. And there's an article, the one kind of analytical, literary, critical article I was able to find talks about the use of color in the film and brings that up. So we'll get into that later.
Ooh.
Yes, I know. And then just a final kind of fact, it grossed $2 million on its release.
Wow,
I know.
That sounds impressive.
It was a commercial hit at the time for that much money. And I did manage to find a review from 1960 when the movie came out.
You've got a clipping on your computer. I cannot believe this. This is amazing.
I'm gonna read it out loud just because it's enjoyable.
Yes.
The fall has been omitted from the film version of House of Usher, but not the pitfalls. American International, this is the film company, with good intentions of presenting a faithful adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's classic tale of the macabre to neighborhood theater audiences yesterday, blithely ignored the author's style and fell right in. Poe's prose style, as notable for ellipses, as imagery, compressed or eliminated the expository passages habitual to 19th century fiction and invited the reader's imaginations to participate. By studiously avoiding explanations not provided by the text, I don't know what the sentence means, and stultifying the audience's imaginations by turning Poe's murky mansion into a cardboard castle encircled by literal green mist, the film producers have made a horror film that provides a fair degree of literacy at the cost of a patron's patience.
I guess I can kind of see the cardboardy suggestion, but I mean, you're limited in those days by how much special effects you can actually do.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. It goes on. Just why the handsome young visitor, played by Mark Damon,
it sounds about right,
at the Usher's residence didn't demand some logical explanation for the strange behavior of his fiancée and her mysterious brother is never satisfactorily explained. The young man, his own motivations as unclear as the nature of the curse of the Ushers, is rebuffed by the butler ordered from the house by his brother-in-law-to-be and offered no explanations at all by his fiancée, who confines her conversations with her betrothed to a few vague syllables before vanishing into a handy secret passageway.
Mm-hmm.
When the hero manifests only polite amusement, he seems less illustrative of well-bred Victorian manhood than just emasculated. Yeah. Under the low-budget circumstances, Vincent Price and Myrna Fahey should not be blamed for portraying the decadent ushers with arch affectation, nor Mark Damon held to account for the traces of Brooklynese that creep into his stiffly costumed impersonation of the mystified interloper.
That's great.
And then it goes on to say, still, it's way better than the other movie that showed with the double feature, because I think it was released with.
I see.
Two.
I seem to remember them saying that, not them, I say them as in, the movie industry, they were worried it wasn't going to work because it was in Technicolor.
I think it was the first one he did in CinemaScope.
Oh, okay, that must have been it.
Yeah.
But I thought that actually lended itself well to the actual story. I feel like it kind of needs a little bit of color or campiness or joie de vivre. I mean, you're talking about Poe here. He's like super drama queen. So it fits. I liked it.
Yeah, well, and I think something that when we get to Crimson Peak, we'll talk about as well.
Oh my gosh, for sure.
But just there's very specific colors that are associated with a text coming out of this time with the Victorian era, which is what this article, The Colors of Melancholy in Roger Corman's House of Usher, talks about. Although the one that they really play up is just red in both movies. The argument here, though, is that melancholy is actually gray, punctuated by yellow, orange, and sulfuric spots of industry and circulation.
It sounds a little bit too picky.
Oh my gosh. This article, this is one of those literary articles where you just read it and you're like...
Your eyes start to glaze over?
No, this person used a thesaurus.
Okay.
To just... What big words can I put in here?
I have no tolerance for that.
No.
I mean, I am a minimalist, but at the same time, come on, cool it with the adjectives. We get what you're talking about.
Yeah, or you don't need... And he draws on some French people that I don't know, but he had some good points about the color red, and that's really just what I was looking for.
Right. Yeah. I think in a way, so I think if you're talking about, colors here, I feel like black and gray and, different shades of gray are really important to like the horror films of the 30s and 40s. You get into when color is used and you don't, because you have color, you have to kind of use color. Like nowadays, we don't care any kind of, because all movies are color. It doesn't matter what kind of, color scheme we use. But in the 60s, it was like, okay, now we have to make use of primary colors as much as possible. So you have that oversaturation, and that's fine. So I think red, definitely for horror films, was like, okay, how can we show, blood or death? And it's like, oh, red. It's an obvious choice. So I think it works, Yeah,
and I mean, even up through the 80s, though, they were still kind of using red in an interesting way. I mean, look at Jaws.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar, they only used red for blood or for when the shark was around. Otherwise, there's no red anywhere.
Oh, interesting.
Although, some of the recent saturation re-releases or whatever has the orange looking very much like a blood orange, but I was like, okay, I'll let that one slide.
Yes.
It's not the, Ariel red that we get when we do see the blood. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's even any red in Halloween either.
I haven't seen that.
Okay.
It's one of the 698 films I haven't seen.
Only 690.
I've gone up since our last recording.
You have.
I've binge watched some Hitchcock, so.
Ooh. That would make for an interesting weekend.
Oh, man. So great.
I think we have some of those on our list, too, anyway.
We do. Yeah. I got to add some more. So.
Yeah, which will be good.
But anyway, red.
So,
very cool.
Yes. Before we get to red, though, let's set up the film. What happens? It opens and bang, you're right at the House of Usher. This guy who looks like he has a really bad tan. It looks like a very fake tan, this Mark Damon.
Yeah.
Kind of like a West Side Story tan for the people that were supposed to be playing the sharks but weren't actually.
Right. Not actually Latino.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's irritating. But I mean, tan in the 60s, especially when color comes on the scene, is a very big thing. You can kind of blame Cary Grant for that a little bit.
Yeah. No.
And Beach Blanket Bingo and whatever else there is.
Oh, we're going to get to those. I'm so excited. So anyways, he drives. He's riding a horse. He doesn't drive. He rides his horse up to this house. And for the record, it's completely ambiguous just when this is taking place.
Mhm.
It's kind of, it feels like Crimson Peak in that way. It's just like, let me think of something that's Victorian and put it together and not really care about any sort of actual
In a way,
era.
that's more specific. That looks like 1880s to me. This looks like 1870-ish, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. Anyways, he arrives, Mark Damon's character, whose name I honestly can't tell you.
He lost on me.
Mark Damon. It always confuses me because I keep seeing Matt Damon. I'm like, it's not Matt Damon. Matt Damon.
Recast.
Yeah,
no, I'm kidding.
I wouldn't hate him.
No.
In that role. Anyways.
I definitely would want Oscar Isaac to play.
Ooh.
The Mark Damon character. Of which we don't know the name.
Oh.
It would work though, right?
Oh, I would love that. I would love that.
Recast.
I don't know who I would put as Vincent Price. We can think about it.
There is only one Vincent.
There's only one Vincent in my heart. There's two Vincents. Vincent Price and then Vincent, the name of the beast in the 1980s Beauty and the Beast TV show.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh my gosh. I went through a summer where that's all I watched. I love Beauty and the Beast adaptations. We'll talk about it later. Yes. Anyways, okay, so Matt Damon shows up. And he's greeted by this butler, and he's like, I want to see my fiance. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, Roderick won't let you come in. He doesn't actually have a British accent, but he's very just sort of, the master forbids it. And he's like, I'm coming in. He goes, okay. There's weird kind of interactions. Like,
he kind of gives up. He's like, I'm going to stand firm, and then I guess, okay, yeah, you can
The butler gives up a bunch during this movie, though. There's
poor
a lot.
Guy.
Poor butler.
Long-suffering butler.
Yeah, and so the first person we meet after...
He's just the candelabra holder. That's all he functions as.
He really is. The candelabra holder, and he gives you gruel.
The gruel, yeah.
That's about it. Anyways, so he escorts Matt Damon up the stairs of this house, and there's red candles and candelabras everywhere. Everywhere. Like, it's just, how much money did they spend on red candles? Like, that had to be another 20% of the budget, because there's red candles literally everywhere.
Red candle budget, how many, like $20,000?
That's what I would need.
I wonder how many red candles you could buy for $20,000.
I'm sure it's a lot. Well, it depends on where you're buying them.
Wicca site sold out across the Twin Cities. Oh.
Yes. Yeah, so anyways, the butler escorts Matt Damon into this ornate bedroom, which happens to be Vincent Price's bedroom, and Vincent Price immediately is like, what are you doing here? And he has his lute, and they talk about things, and basically the entire tension between these two men is Matt Damon is like, I want to bring my fiance.
You said Matt again.
I'm doing it on purpose.
Oh, now you're doing it on purpose.
This is just, it's making me happy.
Okay.
Matt Damon says, I want to bring my fiance back to Boston with me. We're going to be married. I love her. And the brother's like, don't talk. You're too loud. My ears are sensitive. My skin is sensitive. But I can play the lute and it's fine. Also, the lighting is a problem, but it's also really bright all the time. They say that it's super dark in the room, but it's always light.
When he first comes into her bedroom, he's like, oh, it's so dark in here. Opens one window, barely any change.
I know.
I've never seen anything like it.
It's hilarious. But anyways, the tension is Roderick Usher, Vincent Price, is like, no, she can't come. She's sick. And then she shows up, the Madeline, and they have dinner, and Mark Damon is like, I'm gonna stay the night. We'll leave in the morning, in the next couple days, whatever, but I'm not leaving without you. I love you. We're getting married. Everyone misses you back in Boston, Madeline. So they go to this dinner scene, and she's wearing a red dress.
Of course she is.
A fabulous red dress.
It is neat, yeah.
And immediately from those first interactions there that she has with her brother, incest vibes.
It's not a phrase I ever thought I would hear.
Incest vibes.
Ugh.
Is it better if I sing it?
No.
Incest vibes. Incest vibes.
Oh, gosh. Yikes.
There is some erotic hair sniffing in this movie, though, too.
Which scene is that?
I think she's laying in bed at one point, and he comes in, he's like, darling, we'll leave tomorrow, and he goes...
Kind of grabs... Yeah, kind of like, instead of copying a feel, kind of gets a sniff in there. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyways, they have this dinner scene, and this is really the most you see of Madeline is when they're having dinner, and she doesn't say much. And then afterwards, the infamous lute scene, which I'm surprised is not a meme, honestly.
It has to be a meme. It has all the criteria of a meme.
It does. It's a minute of Vincent Price just sitting in this chair playing this lute, but he's playing it badly. There's no melody. It's not a song. He's just plucking the strings, and the entire time he's just watching Matt Damon and his sister just kind of look at each other and then look at him. And then once he's done playing, Matt Damon goes, "Oh, did you write it yourself?" And then Vincent Price goes, "Yes, I did." And it's just the first time I watched this movie that this was the moment. It's only like half an hour in. This is the moment where I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Not only is Vincent Price blonde, it's just this moment is just amazing.
He clearly can't play the lute. So you know it's not dubbed. Or
No.
maybe it is. I don't know. But it's just the most... It's just...
That would be some really
sounds
tragic
like
dubbing.
me when I haven't touched my guitar in about 6
and you're
months.
tuning it, and you're like,
and I'm tuning it, and I'm also forgotten like most of my chords, so it's like
right. It was me trying to learn how to play the ukulele, but I was successful.
That's good.
Thank you. I spent like 4 hours. I've forgotten everything I learned, but it was a good 4 hours. It's fine.
Sounds like a good 4 hours.
Yeah. Anyways,
but that is one of the worst performances I've ever seen
of the lute.
Yeah.
Of which apparently you've seen. Are you a lute connoisseur, Sarah?
No, I'm not. My father does like lute playing. My mother usually
Why didn't
turns
he
it
just
off.
play Greensleeves? Like that
I
would have
don't
been.
know. It's so easy. Well, he's just playing random morbid chords. He's so emo.
He's so. This is a really emo movie.
He's 19th century blonde emo. That's what he is.
Who's an emo blonde guy from like the early 2000s? Was Gerard Way blonde at one point from My Chemical Romance?
Oh yeah, probably. I think every band in the 2000s went through a blonde phase.
Every band in the 2000s went through an emo phase. Now everyone's getting into like their indie music, like Jared Leto.
Or pop country, which makes me want to vomit.
I've never loved you more than in this moment. Anyways, so the rest. Well, let's just speed talk through the rest of the movie because honestly, the plot doesn't matter after a certain point.
There isn't much of a plot.
There isn't much of a plot. Because,
although I read in the book that not only are they supposed to be twins,
yes,
but the lake surrounding this ridiculous household apparently glows in the night, and I don't know if that's like what the Damon's character is like imagining or what exactly, but that's what was in the book.
Right.
That's from what I remember.
Yeah, I mean, anyways, that night comes, and someone has night terrors of some kind.
I think Damon's character does. Isn't he knocked unconscious at one point?
He might be. Well, he's the dreams later. But that night, something happens.
Mm-hmm.
No, he finds Madeline, like, he wakes up and goes to investigate because he just senses something. And there's this chapel in this house.
Oh, that chapel scene, yes.
And she's just lying in this coffin sleeping. And he's like, what is he doing? The butler's like, don't wake her. He's like, I'll carry her. So this old man picks up and carries the girl back to her bed. And then Vincent Price wakes up. He's like, what are you doing here? And Matt Damon's like, I'm leaving with her tomorrow. And then, so of course she wakes up, not feeling well, which could have seen a mile away. So Matt Damon goes, he's like, just eat some of this gruel, like just try and eat something. We're gonna be leaving. We'll like get your things, just whatever. And she's like, I need to rest or whatever. And then he leaves for some reason. I think Vincent Price might come in at one point or whatever.
Shows him his painting collection or something.
Yes,
crap like
talks about the Usher family and how everyone in the Usher family is a terrible person, whores and thieves and murderers and psychopaths and
insurance salesman. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I made that one up. But
lawyers.
Lawyers. Uncle Fester was a lawyer. No,
was he?
No, I don't think so.
That would be amazing.
AU.
Okay, so sidebar. There's this guy I knew from high school that I was friends with.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, my family came from, like, I come from a long line of, like, bank robbers and things like that. And he said, my great-great-great-grandmother or whatever, came over here with her pimp and didn't have a last name. And so when they were at Ellis Island, this is the story he told me. I don't know if it's true, but I like to think that it is. And so I tell it, like,
quietly
all the time.
dying.
I do. Apparently the guy was like, what's her name? And the pimp looked over and saw that there was this new port being built. And he goes, oh, Newport. And so that's why he got his last name. Wow. That's my friends.
You know, I've heard a lot of crazy Ellis Island stories. I would not doubt that.
I know. It just makes me laugh so much. It's a great story.
Badass.
Okay, so
back to the movie.
Back to House of Usher, yes. So then she something happens, and then they're like, "Oh, she's dead," and the viewer though is like, "Okay, whatever."
Yeah.
And so they have this burial scene. Not really. They have like a visitation, and Matt Damon and Vincent Price are praying, and the butler's praying, and then you see Madeline's fingers start to move a little bit, and Vincent Price is like, "Okay," slams the door to the coffin. It's like, "We're gonna take care of her. Just gonna get." Oh, before you think she's dead though, you do see that they keep this crypt in the house, and then they're like, "And this is my coffin," and he's like, "This is awful." Yeah. And Matt Damon's like, "Why would you have this in your house?"
For future use.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. So, and then the story, as you know, it really starts to pick up. And there's not much of the story left. They bury her, I guess, and Matt Damon still stays. Like, he stays another night. This is where I'm getting the homoerotic vibes, too. And then he has this nightmare of Madeline being buried alive, and of the Usher family ancestors grabbing for him and trying to prevent him from getting to her, and Vincent Price is stealing her away. And then you find out, surprise, guess what? She actually was buried alive, and then it becomes this manhunt. Like, he's like horrified that Vincent Price would do this, and Vincent Price is like, it had to be done, it had to happen this way. And so Matt Damon goes chasing all over the house trying to find her, and she is now suddenly super strong with crazy eyes, and Raccoon attacks Vincent Price with a candelabra, or maybe she just tries to choke him. Like
tries to choke him.
Yeah, he takes this pistol out, but then sees her, drops it, and she just runs over and starts choking him. And then the house starts to burn down, and then it sinks at the end. And
all those damn candles. That's what it is.
All the candles. The moral of the story is, don't buy a shit ton of red candles.
Yeah, but also don't have candles in every single room and then leave them unattended. You've only got one old butler. He's not going to check every damn candle to make sure it hasn't started the whole house on fire.
And also just don't bury your siblings alive.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb to have.
Yeah, they might annoy you sometimes, but do you really want to go
through
the trouble?
I wouldn't put my brother in the wall.
No. I do wish they had actually put the person in the wall, because I feel like in the story the twin sister's actually in a wall, like she's not just in a crypt.
Yeah, because she stands up and walks out of the wall, and that's why it's even creepier. It's not like she's just lying in a coffin. I think they did the coffin thing to kind of, line up with the whole Dracula success of coffins. It was kind of a branding thing for horror movies. It's like, there has to be a coffin in it,
Yeah, and a bloody... There was a cool shot where there's her bloody hand reaches out of the coffin.
Right after he says, "Oh, I can feel her nails scratching on trying to get out."
Or I can hear her nails scratching, blah, 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 like shit. And you don't know if Vincent Price is actually hearing this, or if this is just in his mind. Like he's imagining. But it turns out that it actually is.
Yeah.
So then that's kind of how the movie ends. Honestly, like you were saying before, there's not a lot of plot to the movie. What I find interesting about it is the color piece, but also... it's not as deep of a... I don't think there's as many layers to this movie as there was to The Black Cat.
Right.
Like, in The Black Cat, there's a lot going on.
There's so much to unpack.
Right. I think for Roger Corman, in this movie at least, he was just kind of making more of like a straightforward Poe adaptation. Later on, I think they got to be a little more layered, in that there's a lot of kind of sexual imagery and things like that that's more latent here.
Yeah.
However, so this Colors of Melancholy article, they do talk about sort of that latent sexuality, and about just the idea of being a doppelganger. And so what he says is, if in Poe the abstraction of Roderick is that of a mortal who is painting an idea, talking about these horrifying paintings Roger's made. In Corman, this abstraction is signposted by desire, sexuality, an undeclared, unacceptable relationship. In the end, desire, seduction, and the id are located deep within the structure of the story. In emphasizing red, Corman reveals sexuality to be of symbolic centrality.
Interesting.
And I mean, I don't know if I was reading this, if I was watching something else at one point, but I guess it didn't really hit me until recently just how sexuality is so closely tied with horror.
Oh, absolutely.
Movies. And I was actually, so I'm working on a project right now talking about the Victorian era and how popular it was to write about women who had been killed by men, by lovers or whatever. And it ended up sending me down this rabbit hole where I read an article about Final Girls and how the thing with Final Girls is that the reason it's a final girl that survives is and the reason that it works as a story is that with the final girl, there's always a threat of sexual assault and how common that is just for women nowadays.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and so just kind of juxtaposing that with this kind of Colors of Melancholy article and this idea of red I just find it really, really fascinating, especially what they do to Madeline's character, because she doesn't have much of a character.
She does not, no.
No.
She's very controlled by her brother.
She's very controlled by her brother, and maybe that is sort of that threat then that is later more fleshed out in quote-unquote Final Girl films. But they both wear red too, which I think, because at the end of the movie, he's wearing red, and she's wearing the black that he was wearing at the beginning.
Right. Ah.
Whereas she was wearing red at the beginning, and he's wearing black. And they kind of talk about how that it's like Madeline becomes Roderick's shadow.
Interesting. I know another thing too that's discussed about not just Fall of the House of Usher, but any movie or book or whatever where they talk about either a house or a family that's kind of basically crumbling away, and it's like it's kind of commentating on how these old families and these old houses are not sustainable anymore. And that's that part of it. And I think it relates to the sexuality in a way, because their relationship is sort of nebulous and unhealthy, and in the very least, he's sort of, he's very controlling and basically emotionally abusive, and that sort of, that atmosphere of their lifestyle has kind of, it sort of breeds this behavior. That's what I'm kind of getting from it. So I think that for me anyway, that's the connection I make between sexuality and the kind of falling of the house and of the estate and the family.
Yeah, and it also talks about just kind of the fear of, or maybe less fear, but commentary in a modern world on that sort of traditional system that was so upheld at that time. And I mean, I think it's kind of controversial of Poe to write if you consider it in that way, writing at the time. Because in the 1800s, it's still very much, you don't marry outside of your circle. Marrying your cousins was like not a big deal because it's all about familial wealth and maintaining your status. And,
right. Like Queen Victoria married her first cousin.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And like all of her kids had problems, and her fourth son or whatever had hemophilia
and was also accused of being Jack the Ripper. Sidebar.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, so the there's chronic inbreeding, as we joke about, the English royal family.
Yeah.
So, and in a lot of those old families, like you said, it was very permissible to have, marry your cousins and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and so the ultimate argument of this article is that just by using red, Corman's able to bring out this latent idea in Poe's works, which is that sexuality is destructive in some way. I still think it's slightly underplayed here, and that might only be because when I watch this movie, I can't not think about Crimson Peak, in which everything is very, like, the sexual relationship between the brother and sister is very explicit.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And so
the parallel between this movie and that is just really undeniable.
It's really interesting. And so not being able to separate myself from that movie, I think maybe changes how much I'm willing to say this movie does, when in actuality it probably at the time seemed a lot more obvious and maybe even more scandalous than it does today. Because today it's just kind of like it's implied. And I think I prefer I prefer when you hint at an incestuous relationship rather than have like a weird one. Like, it's that idea, like, I don't think I ever want to actually see the mad woman in the attic.
Right, yeah.
You want it to be hinted at, because in the Gothic tradition, they had to use symbols in order to make certain things explicit without making them explicit.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's one of my only major complaints with Crimson Peak as a whole. And granted, I think we'll be talking about it's on our list at some point to kind of talk about.
Maybe toward Halloween or something.
Well, yeah, Deltober.
Yes, Deltober.
Guillermo del Toro which we'll just announce now we're having a Guillermo del Toro themed October because he
Yes.
does so many horror films.
Yeah.
And he does them just
Very excited.
remarkably well.
Yeah.
So.
Last time we talked about incest in a public place, someone came into our conversation in the middle of it, so they had no context for why we were talking about incest. It was like, oh, God.
When are we talking about incest in a public place?
We were waiting for class to start, and we were talking about it, and then one of our fellow classmates came in, an
What
older
class was
lady,
this?
and was like, oh.
What class was this? I don't remember.
It wasn't the sci-fi class, it was the class before it.
Oh, Mackenzie's class?
Yes.
That makes sense, though, because I think we were talking about King Lear or
we were,
whatever. No, it was
Lear,
no, it was, I can think of it. It was the Duchess of Malfi.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, that's what we were talking about. Yeah.
And you said, I prefer my incest to be unspoken or not seen or something. And then she heard that, and we were just like, oh.
Yeah, I know. It's
awkward.
Very,
yes.
Yeah.
No, but I agree. And I think that, like you said, it probably would have been more shocking in the 60s to see or have that implied much more. I mean, nowadays, shock value's out the window. We can see plenty of stuff, and no one bats an eyelid. But with
which I think is problematic.
Absolutely. Yeah,
especially in, that's a whole other thing. I think we can... I think that'll be part of the Ex Machina conversation.
Yes. Oh, man, for sure. I have so much to say about Ex Machina.
I know.
Too much to say.
That's
anyway.
Be a long episode. Anyways, so...
We're reaching the end of our episode.
I know, and we haven't even been talking, I feel like, for that long. There's just... Unfortunately, House of Usher doesn't have as many layers.
It's not as meaty.
Ultimately.
It's more of a... I think our analyzation is more deep than the actual film.
No, I would agree with that. I mean... In terms of the performances in the film itself, stepping away from the literary criticism, I think Vincent Price does a really good job. I only really know Vincent Price from his stint as the head, the kind of conjurer on the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. So I haven't seen a lot of his live action work, and I'm looking forward to watching the rest of them.
For sure.
And I'm super into like his voice and mustache and everything.
You'd party with his mustache, right?
I would.
Okay, so how many red candles out of 10 are we going to give this movie?
6.5.
Yeah, I would say, maybe. I'm going to vote a little less than you. I'm going to say like maybe 5.
That's fair. Maybe.
But if you ignore the campiness, I'd say 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I only give it 6.5 just because I think Vincent Price, while like that reviewer said, they are playing very arch versions of these characters, I think he does a really good job. Like he saves the movie.
Yeah,
I think
so.
Think he makes it.
He's definitely much more weighty than the other two actors. I mean,
100%.
they're great, but he's like the central.
I mean, Matt Damon's fine, but Vincent Price definitely steals the show.
Yeah, very good job.
Yeah, it kind of. There's this meme going around on Twitter right now where it's like, replace the entire cast of a movie but leave one human actor. What would it be like if you just left Vincent Price or then had the rest of the cast of the movie be Muppets?
Oh my gosh. Well, he there was a little clip of him talking to Kermit. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Oh my gosh. I have to show you that later. Okay. It's like
good.
he and Kermit are sitting next to each other and like Kermit literally attacks him like as a vampire. It's so funny. But yeah, the gift set's on Tumblr somewhere.
Oh, that's awesome. Anyways, would you recommend watching The House of Usher?
As I kind of said in the last episode, in my last comment, I'm always reluctant to share funky movies with people just because I don't know how they react. But if I knew someone was kind of down for some sort of like fun horror movie and very 60s, and I would definitely recommend it. I think it's definitely a classic of its genre. I would say it's pretty high quality and very entertaining. I was watching the whole time. So
yeah, and it's lauded as the best of the Corman Poe series. Just critically, it did really well at the time too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the reason I would recommend it would be for Vincent Price's performance, and also because if you have a couple glasses of wine, it's a great time. It's a great time. I definitely drink. Have some Merlot. Have a nice red with this film. That would be my recommendation, I suppose.
For sure.
Anyways.
Great. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, episode 2 done.
Episode 2 going to be uploaded. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. We have the same account name, so it's just Shadows and Light Podcast. Yep. And I promise I will do a better job of getting my citations to Sarah so we can actually publish them. So if you want to read these articles, I mean, all credit to these authors. A lot of the things that I'm saying, I mean, I hope I'm
quote. I can't do in-text citations when I'm speaking verbally. That would be a little strange.
MLA,
MLA format,
bracket, 32
footnotes.
Yeah,
that sort of thing. But we'll definitely do that, and then I'll also try and get on top of exporting this to iTunes and Stitcher just so it's easier and it's not just on SoundCloud.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anyways, well, we'll see you next time.